I saw that it was Potluck Sunday. I smell that it's Potluck Sunday. I will try to have us out of here 2:30 at the latest, I promise. So I can hear my cheaters took some damage I wasn't aware of. Yeah, I'm going to go without cheaters today. This might actually be shorter than that.
Well, that would be a different translation.
There you go. Well, you get the New King James translation every Sunday. I should turn that thing on too. We're in Matthew chapter 18, and if you remember, going back to chapter 16, Peter had made a confession that Jesus was the Christ, and as soon as he made that confession and had that conversation with Jesus, Jesus told everybody, don't tell anybody who I am. Now, we're in this very short period of time from where he's at now, leading up to the crucifixion. And Jesus didn't want him to know he was the Messiah. He didn't want that pressure. He didn't want that added. And as part of that, Jesus also begins teaching his disciples in earnest and telling them, I've got to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be killed, and I'm going to raise from the dead in 3 days. Now, he's telling them, don't tell them I'm the Messiah. I'm going to be put to death. I'm going to rise again. And this is what Jesus has been focusing his teaching with his disciples on. And so in chapter 18, verse 1, Jesus has been doing this, and this is what happens in chapter 18. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Now, you just told us not to tell anybody that you're the Messiah, and you just told us you're going to go die. But since we're on the subject of you dying, which one of us is the best? Which one of us is the greatest? What's it take to be number one in the kingdom? I think in the back of the guy's mind that they still kind of thought that this was going to be an earthly kingdom. They thought that they were going to have, positions in the royal court, so to speak. And so that's in their mind, even though Jesus has been saying the opposite. Well, Jesus calls a child. He puts the kid in front of them all. He says, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. These are his disciples. These are the guys who are closest to him. These are the guys who've been listening to his sermons and his teachings and walking up and down all Israel with him. And he just told them, unless you become like this kid, you're never going to get in. Now, I think we gloss over this verse sometimes, but Jesus just said to the guys closest to him in ministry, unless you become like this kid, you ain't going anyway. That's not normally the way we look at that verse, but that is what he said. I really do need the cheaters. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. Now, this is a child, this is not a teenager. I will point that out right away. It's something about little kids that they're very accepting of what you tell them. There's something about little kids that they can receive joy or they can get sad just based on, you said this was going to happen and I believe you it's going to happen. Now, I remember when I was, actually I don't think I was much older than maybe 5. One of the things I liked to do the best was go fishing with my granddad. Now, picture a farm pond, and that's where we went fishing with granddad. This was not like Alaskan fishing with granddad. This was not some big thing. This was, we would go and sit by the pond in the back 40 and worms and bobbers, and you'd sit there. And that was pretty cool when I was 5. I now like trolling and jigging for walleye and a whole lot of other types of fishing. But when I was a little kid, that was fishing. That was time with Granddad. That was something I loved. So if Mom and Dad said to me, oh, we're going to go to your grandma and grandpa's this weekend, and maybe Granddad will take you fishing, oh, that was big stuff. That could keep me happy and trying to behave myself for the whole week, right? That was enough that I would actually try to go to bed when I was told, and wash up before dinner and all those little things that little kids don't always do a good job with. That was great. And so Jesus is saying, if you're like that, right? If you believe me and trust that there's something great coming because I said so, or if you trust me and you don't want to do that because the results will be negative, and you just trust me just like a little kid would, that's what I want from you. But if you can't be like that, don't even worry about being greatest in the kingdom. You're not even getting there. Now, that is a challenge to our way of thinking and our faith, because we like to think that we have something to do with things and that we can make stuff happen. My boss gives me something to do at work. Hey, we need to go in this direction. We need to have this happen. Great, I am going to make that happen. Right? We develop that mentality. Or we've got this going on or that going on. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do it. Jesus doesn't say that. How much power does a little kid have to make something happen? He can either do or not do what you tell him. That's about it. There was no way that at 5 years old I could get the family to Grandma and Granddad's house when I was 5 years old. My feet didn't, reach the pedals in the station wagon back then. Jesus says you got to be this way. But he goes on to say something else here, that right in the middle of this, he throws this out. He says, if any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea. Oh, wait a second, Jesus. A minute ago, you just said we had to be childlike in our faith. Now you're saying we'd be better off drowning if... Where's this coming from? Well, he goes on to explain. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks. Occasions for stumbling are bound to come, but woe to the one by whom the stumbling block comes. Well, what kind of stumbling blocks are there that we put in other children's way, in other believers' way, in other people's way? What stumbling blocks are we putting there? Because remember something here. Jesus isn't talking about the world and about those bad people out there. Jesus is talking to his closest disciples, and he's saying, you're not even going to get into the kingdom of heaven if you're not like one of these kids. And woe to you if you put a stumbling block in front of one of these kids, because your stumbling blocks, it'd be better for you if you were drowned. And keep in mind, he's talking to his disciples. He's talking to good synagogue-going Jewish boys. Good Sunday school, church-going people. What type of stumbling blocks are there out there that we put in other people's way? And I don't know which ones you do, but I do some. You ever talk bad about somebody at church? Oh, now you're not even, some of you aren't even looking at me. Okay. They ask if you talk bad about me. You don't have to take it personally. What kind of stumbling block does that put in front of somebody who hears you say it? Well, I didn't mean it that way, or I was just... No. You created a stumbling block. How many of us are consistent in our faith, and in doing so, we make it easy for people to follow Jesus? Well, maybe sometimes we do. However, are we sometimes inconsistent in our faith in what we do? Do other people see our inconsistencies and go, well, you know what? Their faith really isn't real either. And we create another kind of stumbling block. How many of us are controlled by our sins? Well, that's just a private sin. I don't make a big deal out of it. That's not very public. But the people in our lives, the children or the maybe the spiritually less mature, they see those problems and don't see us addressing them, and we create a stumbling block. Now, those are really kind of low-key stumbling blocks I just mentioned. That isn't stuff like public sin, and that's not stuff like, engaging in unlawful behavior while pretending to be a Christian. That's not stuff like being known for being dishonest in your business dealings, but promoting your faith publicly. Those are big stumbling blocks, right? I used to go to a church where one of the elders in the church was a business owner. He was well known in the community, and he was known for being a crook. That was a stumbling block for a lot of people going to our church. Because if they didn't already have a faith and a desire to worship where we were at, they weren't going to go any place that Bob was a church member, let alone an elder. Those are stumbling blocks. And Jesus addresses those stumbling blocks to his disciples. He doesn't say this is the bad stuff people in the world are doing. He's saying this is the stuff people in the church are doing to cause a problem. He goes on to say, if your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life maimed or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into the eternal fire. If your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the hell of fire. If you're doing this stuff, it's better if you cut it off and stop it, because you'd be better to lose the thing that you're losing than to go to hell and keep it. Don't be deceived. God is not mocked. He knows the hearts of men. He goes on to say, take care that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you, in heaven, their angels continually see the face of my Father in heaven. Now, this is this verse where people get the idea of guardian angels from. Well, what is Jesus saying here? He is saying, quite literally, don't despise, don't harm, don't put a stumbling block in front of one of these kids. Why? Because there's an angel no, he didn't say the angel was right there going to wonk you on your head. Although maybe that might happen. That would be okay sometimes. Every little child, according to this verse, has an angel. And that angel is in heaven. And that angel is staring God in the face. That's what that verse says, literally. Can you imagine that? Just think about it for just a minute. There's an angel in heaven looking God right in the face every time something bad happens to a kid on this earth. There is an angel in heaven calling God's attention to what's going down here on behalf of little children. That's what that verse says. Every kid that's working as a slave in a mine in Africa to get you the rare earth elements so you can have your Prius and feel good about your environmental superiority. All those kids that are enslaved to get that stuff for you in China and work on these things. Every kid that's sexually abused. Every kid that's mistreated at school. Every kid that is in any way, shape, or form hurt on earth. There is an angel in heaven looking God in the face going, what are you going to do about this? Now, I don't know about you. I do enough stuff that I don't want God's attention called to. I would sure hate to have an angel sitting there calling his attention to it. And Jesus says that is what's going on. Their angel is looking God straight in the face. What do you think? If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go search for the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly, I tell you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it's not the will of your Father in heaven that one of these little ones should be lost. It's not the will of God that even one kid should not be in heaven with him. Now, every one of us at one time were little kids. Some of us, that was many more decades ago than others. Nobody amen that. Okay.
It's our birthday.
We got a birthday coming up. Here's the thing. Every person who's ever been born, God wants every one of them in heaven. Everyone. It's not God's will that even one of his children ever be lost. It is not his will that any of us should not make it home. And he wants that so badly. His love, his desire for us is so strong that he sent his son to die on a cross to take care of our sins so that we could go home and be with him. Now, with that little nugget there in your mind, don't put any roadblocks out there. Don't put any stumbling blocks out there for anybody else. And if you want to be great in God's kingdom, you're going to have to get humble, and you're going to have to go back to when you were a kid, and you're going to have to trust God like you would trust your granddad. That's the type of faith. Jesus never complained. Any place where he says, you have little faith, or he talks about little faith, he's not complaining if they've got a little bit of faith or they somehow don't have enough faith. He's recognizing you've got some faith. You've got enough faith to get where you need to go. We just have to keep reminding ourselves we got to go back to living on faith. I am in my 50s, and I still struggle with some sins that I picked up the bad habit of sinning in my teens. Thing I wish I could, I've talked about before, so it's okay if it's on the video, I guess. I wish I never would have learned to cuss. I wish I'd never, and it was a learned behavior. I wish I never would have learned that behavior. Now, I cuss a lot less as your preacher than I do when I was working in the oil field. I'll tell you that. That's probably a pretty true statement. But there's some things that, because we get in the habit of doing them, it can be a stumbling block for other people. And that stumbling block creates occasion for other people not to get saved. And in addition to that, the only way that stumbling block can be removed from my life, that sin can be removed by my life, isn't by me. It's by trusting in the Lord and going back to him lots and lots of times. Father, I'm wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I confess it was wrong. Please forgive me. There are days I have that prayer more than once a day. Not just about that, but about other stuff. So as we move on here, he starts talking, and he says, if a member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. Okay. How many sins do we commit against other people in the church? Oh, we don't commit any sins. I'm perfect. It's the people in the church that sin against me. Do you sin against your brothers and sisters? Anybody in here ever have somebody else take your parking spot in that parking lot? And, oh wait, I'm getting some smiles. Ever feel like maybe there might have been something sinful going on in that? See, we don't necessarily have big sins, right? We don't necessarily do what we would say, nobody at church has ever, stuck up my bank. Right? I've never been behind the teller line, had one of y'all come in with a gun and sin against me and rob my bank. And you don't need to start tomorrow either. But here's the thing. We think of some of these big sins, but really what happens is they're usually small things. It's usually inconsequential things. And so we're told when somebody does that to you, or you think they did it to you, or you got your panties in a wad over something somebody said, what are you supposed to do about it? You're supposed to go talk to that person. Because you want to know something, when you go talk to somebody about something that you think they did that was horrible, they don't even necessarily know that they did the thing that you think was bad. And they certainly may not have ever meant it that way. And yet, by the time we get something built up in our head, well, I can't believe they said this. They know that my cousin did that, and that's a family, that's a sore spot. And boy, they're just really bad people because and you work this whole thing up in your head to where they're basically Satan with a pitchfork because they said something that they had no idea affected you at all. And then when you go and you talk to the person, they go, oh, well, that's not what I meant. I was thinking about this way. And you go, oh, I've been mad at you for like 6 months over this. Because we work stuff up in our head that isn't necessarily so. Well, it says, go and talk to the one person, the two of you alone. If the member listens to you, you've regained that one. Well, what if you just found out that there was nothing to the thing you had built up in your head in the first place? Well, then I guess you kind of smooth that over. You got it worked out. Maybe they really did do something bad, and you bring it to their attention, and they're sorry that you took it that way, and they apologize to you. Well, then you worked it out. Well, if it's a bigger deal than that, and they won't listen to you, verse 16, but if you're not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of two or three witnesses. In other words, if they're not going through this, take a couple other people with you from your other brothers and sisters in Christ and sit there and get the story hashed out in front of some other believers so that it can be established that this is what's going on. If they still refuse to listen to them, tell it to the church. And let the offender who refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile or tax collector. Now, obviously, this is probably only going to apply to more serious situations, right? This is only going to apply to things that have a larger, kind of impact. Because I'm not going to have this conversation just because somebody said something in Bible class I didn't like, right? This is going to be usually a bigger deal than the stuff that we normally get our feathers ruffled about. But it applies equally to stuff that we normally get our feathers ruffled about. Just go talk it out with the person. A lot of times you find it's not a big deal. But if that happens, and it is really a big deal, and it is really this dramatic, and you take it with a couple of brothers, and you take it to, you get the elders involved, and you go through this process of trying to get it resolved, and it can't get resolved, then and only then, after the whole church knows what's going on, then you cut ties. But here's what happens. Most of the times when we have these critical conversations, these difficult talks with people, if we do it in humility, it usually solves the problem pretty early on in the process. It's when we're not willing to humble ourselves like little children, right? If a little kid comes and says to you, if your son or daughter comes and says, Daddy, why'd you say this to me? That was mean. And you start going, oh, what did I say to hurt the kid's feelings? Right? That's our natural reaction. When someone deals with us in humility and in faith and in kindness and softness, the normal way of working that out is, gee, I'm sorry I said that. I'm sorry I did that. I didn't mean it that way. You might have an explanation. You might have an excuse. You might have whatever. But you're going to try to work it out and make amends. So with that, I'm going to stop because getting into verse 21 would finish up the chapter, but we're not going to have as much time to go through that and do that. Going back to recap on this, in the middle of, well, I shouldn't say in the middle. In the part where Jesus is telling his disciples, I'm going to go die, their focus becomes who's the greatest in the kingdom. And in the middle of their focus on who's greatest in the kingdom, Jesus starts telling them, those who have simple childlike faith is who's greatest in the kingdom. And if you're not that way, you're not going to get in. And he said that to the closest disciples. And in saying that and pointing it out, that simple childlike faith, the acceptance of the reality of who Jesus Christ is and his plan for salvation, if you want to be greatest in the kingdom, you embrace that. And while you're embracing that, don't mess up and put stumbling blocks out there for other people. And be conscious of the fact that sometimes the stuff that we say or that we do affects other people in ways that we don't understand or we don't appreciate at the time because we just didn't notice it. Because here's a secret. We don't all see the world the same way. Yeah, I know, look shocked. We don't all see the world in the same way. For those of you in here who are married, right, one of you sees the world through blue sunglasses. You see things the man way of seeing things because you're a man. For those of you in here married who are ladies, you see the world through pink sunglasses because you're ladies, and that's the way how most ladies see things. And you want to know something? Guys don't see it that way. It's not because we're inherently dumb. We're just wearing blue sunglasses. Well, it's the same way in the church with just individuals in the church. Not only do you have the blue and pink sunglasses thing, you've got somebody who grew up in a family that was this way, and they might have a little bit of a brown tint in their sunglasses. And you grew somebody up in the family who grew up this way, they might have a little bit of a purple tint in their sunglasses. I don't know what kind of tint that they have, but they're seeing things one way, and maybe I was watching a movie the other night, and in the movie it was, and I'm not recommending the movie, but it's My Cousin Vinny. Don't watch it. There's a lot of bad language in it. But in the movie, one of the boys from New York is getting accused of robbing a convenience store down south. And the cop says to him, you robbed the store, you shot the clerk. And the kid from New York goes, I shot the clerk? And so they said, well, he confessed to it. No, he's from New York. He talks that way. And if you've ever been around New Yorkers, they talk different than normal people. Right? They've got a normal way of doing stuff. Well, it's that way with everybody in this room this morning. You all have a different way, a different thing that's normal in your head than maybe would be different than what's normal in somebody else's head. And so sometimes the thing we have to do is just talk it out. And we have to be humble like a little kid. And instead of creating a situation where you're a bad person because of this and that, we sit there and go, like a little kid would, you hurt my feelings. You know, you do this thing every single whatever. We tend to do it that way too. We make it a general statement. You always do this. They might not always do that. But instead of saying, hey, when you do this, it really bugs me, please knock it off. We turn it into a big thing where somebody, you did something that's major. We make it a major deal in our head before we're willing to go deal with it. And then we deal with it by gossiping and talking bad and running people down. And we can't do that. We got to be like a little kid. Hey, you did this, it hurt my feelings. I don't understand why you say this. You know, Jim, you spend an awful lot of time talking about certain things in your sermons, and it bugs me. Go ahead, say it. Say it that way. And then listen to the explanation the person gives you. And be willing to accept that the explanation they give you is just as honest, just as genuine, just as heartfelt as the thing that you said to them about what was bothering you. Well, I never knew that topic was sensitive to you. Because I didn't know. I don't know you that well. Or, you know, that is what I said, but the way I meant it was this. Or, I only did that because so-and-so asked me to help out, and I thought that's what they wanted me to do. Oh, you mean you thought you were being helpful? Doesn't it really bug you if someone was trying to do something to be helpful and they made you mad, and now you find out they're being helpful, and now you feel like a jerk because you didn't realize they were just trying to do something good? Yeah, that's happened, doesn't it? But this is the stuff it's talking about. If you want to be pleasing to God, if you want to be great in the kingdom, you don't put any of these stumbling blocks out there. And we can talk about the big stumbling blocks because those are big deals. But the little stumbling blocks are just as much of a stumbling block. If you have a need that you'd like our congregation to help you with, if you need to get, if you need prayers, if you need some material assistance, if you need to talk to somebody about your walk with the Lord or about any spiritual topic whatsoever, we'd like to do that with you. We've got several men here, not just me, that'll visit and talk things over, pray for you. If you don't know the Lord, we'd like to teach you all about God's plan of salvation. With that in mind, if you have a need, would you make it known this morning as we stand and sing?